This is kind of like the secret backroom dealings of Silicon Valley. I don't want to like spill the beans on like the secrets of the industry here, but
Today we're speaking with Michael Novati. Michael, you went from intern to principal E7 level at Meta in 6 years. How did you do that?
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here and share some of my background with you all. Yeah, so it was a lot of hard work. I kind of gave my all to Facebook. I've heard stories from other people too. I wasn't quite sleeping at the office, but as close to that as you could get. Yeah, so that kind of dedication to kind of the company, the vision, it really kind of gave me the drive that to have a lot of impact where it didn't feel like work. I wasn't doing it to check off boxes. I wasn't doing it to get more compensation. I just was trying to contribute as much as I could to this vision, and seeing the growth and impact that had created this snowball effect that just really let me go all in on that. I can talk more specifically about like the different transitions because each transition is really different. Going from more junior to mid-level is a very different transition than going from like a senior staff principal kind of transition. But
which one was the most difficult for you?
For me, going from E6 to E7 was the biggest transition. It's a hard transition for everyone. Most people don't make that transition. Even E5 or like kind of a senior level at Facebook is considered a terminal transition or terminal level that you could just stay at. Getting to 6 alone, it can be pretty hard and takes effort. Going from 6 to 7 there was a big transition. There's only about 1% of the company who are at that level or higher. And there also wasn't a kind of role model or template for me to follow to get there. There were a certain set of archetypes that Facebook has for people at that E7 or higher level. There are things like being a specialist, or they have one called the fixer, who's someone who can write like 3 lines of code all year and save hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes. And I didn't fit into any of these archetypes. There wasn't a role model to compare me against to decide if I was at that level or not. So that was a hard transition because I was having more broad impact than most E6s would have, but not quite the smooth path to 7. So that took work and support from the executives to kind of get there. I can write a lot of code. Like I came out of school, I can just like write code all day. Like what does this like mean to be a coding machine? And the key thing was that impact.
I've seen elsewhere that you deliberately opted out of meetings, bureaucracy, consensus-driven development. Isn't opting out of politics and kind of going on your own, isn't that itself a political choice that requires some deftness? Like, do you recommend that if other people are trying to grow their careers that they do a similar path as you?
I would not recommend that like outright as a strategy because it comes back to the like motivations behind it. I think if you zoom out the most kind of agnostic level here, like trying to look at this like more generally, I honestly haven't worked at another FAANG company personally, so I can't comment on it. Maybe you can comment on Amazon. But the values at Facebook were very strong, and having impact was a very strong value. Having moving fast was like very strong. Being bold was very strong. Nothing is someone else's problem. Like these were really strong like tenets that justified a lot of behavior. And if you were missing a meeting because you were like, I want to go play shuffleboard on the roof, like screw this meeting. I'm not like, you're not missing the meeting to push it or like because of any justifiable value. You're doing it for like a personal thing that you want to do. So like, if I missed a meeting, there was like a reason. The reason was like, I'm doing something else that's so much more value than the meeting that like it is rational to do that. It wouldn't just be like often skipping meetings. It might be like working with the PM separately. Like before the meeting, maybe it's like, I know the PM's going to drive the meeting and I'm like, here's the 5 things that I like did. This is one thing I'm concerned about with like the project that 2 engineers are working on. And the PM's like, got it. PMs are also like super on it and really organized at Facebook. So like, they're like, got it, Michael. And then they can actually like represent me at the meeting. And they might even represent me better than I'd represent myself. And maybe they come out with a better outcome than I would have done if I was there. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily stepping out of the decision-making process or those things. It was just like stepping out of the meetings themselves, the time-consuming part.
The thing in my head is if you're going to write that much code, it's going to have to be spread across multiple code bases I think that's part of your story to get to E7 is like kind of working on your team stuff, but also working across. And I wondered, like, part of being a code machine is sort of operating on your own. One person is the only person that can write code. Yeah, there's some, extreme programming or whatever where you pair program but that's kind of a sort of edge case. Coding is a singular thing, right? And so how do you square that circle that you're responsible for a large impact, but also you kind of opted out of the group dynamics that are there? Like consensus building is part of operating in a large group. Like in a sense, like, do you think that you were capped at E7? Do you think to get to E8, I don't know if that's still an IC role or whatever, but if there was one, like there's a sort of ceiling to a code machine?
I don't know if there's a ceiling to the coding machine, but there is the ceiling that you're talking about. There is only so much that one person can do themselves. And the coding machine is a very...
It's like a lone wolf kind of thing.
I was going to say lonely, but lonely sounds a bit like pessimistic and sad. But in some ways, it's like a specialist role. It's like, I know enough about baseball, but not a ton. But I feel like the closing pitcher in baseball is usually a person who like all they do is show up and throw like 10 pitches. They're like kind of sitting in the corner, warming up like on the edge of the field, whereas everyone else is like, it feels like kind of like, like they have like their job to do and they don't necessarily fit into the whole team super well. I mean, a lot of coding machines don't talk publicly and you don't really know that much about them. I've started talking about it because people find it interesting and they ask me more questions. And some coding machines have emerged out of the caves or whatever. And we were joking that we should start our own like coding machine club, but then everyone's too busy writing code, so no one wants to do it. But yeah, we're all kind of, I think the personality traits are probably fairly similar, that you're kind of like this like lone wolf personality. And I do think that it's somewhat limiting. For me personally, that was actually one of the reasons why I started a long process of leaving Facebook in 2016-ish. When I started like thinking about this, hitting that ceiling, really. It was the first time I got a less than meets all performance review. I was like distraught. I always like getting good grades in school and someone's not giving you a very good performance review. So it was kind of like, I talked to the leaders on the team about it. And it wasn't so much that I was not doing like impactful work. It was that they wanted to push me to have more influence because they thought that I could get to the next level, E8. But to do it, I needed to go beyond just writing code. And I took it as a challenge for that like half to push myself a bit. I organized this thing called the Code Health Summit at Facebook. I got different people who were doing different migration projects from... there was a lot of interesting stuff on the React team before React was as big of a thing, on infrastructure projects. And I got like 10 or 12 people to like talk about what they've been doing at this like in-person summit. The next half I got exceeds expectation and like pathway to E8. And instead of taking that as a like, all right, I'm going to keep going at that, when I got that performance review, I was like, you know what? I think I'm done at Facebook because I don't actually really want to do that. Like I showed you that I can do that. So now like the ambitious, competitive person inside of me is like feels redeemed. I feel like I showed you I can do this. I'm capable. I just don't want to do it. So it's not really like my passion. I don't know if I was being too much of a like jerk or too immature, like, and I should have like zoomed out a bit more, but like I just really like writing a lot of code. I really like shipping things really fast. And that's one of the reasons why I started Formation after leaving Facebook, was the getting back down to like no barriers, writing as much code as possible and shipping things really fast and seeing people use it like minutes later after writing the code, and getting feedback is just what I really like to do on a day-to-day basis. So
does the size of a company at some point just mean that you can't do that at whatever level that you're in?
I do think the size matters, because this kind of feeling I was gave the more specific example of that, like feeling of like the pressures to have broader influence. That did start when I joined Facebook. There was about 200 engineers, and when I left, there was somewhere like 8 to 10,000. And every step of the way, there's more hints and pressure, and all the constructive feedback I got was about trying to have broader influence on people with maybe like writing and in-person things and more leadership. And I do think like that was the nature of the size. I didn't realize this at the time. And I think this is why generally there isn't really a cap on leadership roles for kind of the management track, because a vice president or executive vice president, they're making decisions that will impact the day-to-day of thousands of engineers and the projects they work on, and even their jobs to some extent. If they make a poor decision, like you might end up like having to cut some teams and stuff. Just like the impact that their decisions have on engineers, a lot more than like an individual IC has on that many people. You have to have some kind of collaboration with other people and influence over them and some kind of momentum with a larger group to have some kind of similar impact to like a executive vice president making a decision kind of like weigh against that. So I think there is a ceiling on that IC work.
I'm thinking back to Amazon. We do have senior principals. We do have distinguished engineers. And then right before I left, they promoted one person to the senior vice president level that was an IC. They do write code, I believe. They don't ship a bunch of stuff necessarily. And so, like, is that a function of like Facebook? Can you get to the VP, senior VP level as an IC, or is that just off the table?
There's a few that were at the VP level, a handful, and I think there's still a very small number.
Are they code right? Do they write code?
It varies, but they do write code. As the ones that I'm familiar with write code, different amounts of code. But they definitely, like, when people bring up their names, like when people say Michael Novati, most people will recognize me for my coding volume contributions. When these engineers, they're recognized as like life changers. It's like you have a conversation with this engineer and it like made you better. That is kind of what gets them to that level more than like the code that they're writing. There's one person I know who writes like a few lines of code a year and that are like super impactful. Like he's a really, really smart guy, and he was able to like look at really messy, complicated problems with lots of dependencies, like untangle them as an IC and find like that. It's like the blowing up the Death Star, like find the one thing and like
on
poke
the port.
It. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like poke it and like huge impact.
That's not you.
That's not me. I'm too impatient. I need to like see my stuff ship like every day. If I have a day where I don't have a commit, I like feel like I'm unwell. I mean, it's like that guy.
This episode is brought to you by Linear. Let's be honest. The issue tracker that you're using today isn't very good. The only thing worse than fixing the issue itself is fighting with the software that tracks it. Linear is different. It's incredibly fast, well-designed, and purpose-built for modern software development. Engineers like me love the keyboard shortcuts. It gives me Vim-like vibes, direct integrations with modern and ubiquitous tools like GitHub, and built-in project updates that keep everyone in sync. That way, you don't update your issue and then immediately go to Slack to ping the right people. That's just using Slack for issue tracking, but with more steps. Linear is the default choice for engineers at some of the most well-known and fastest-moving companies in the world, like OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. Modern projects deserve modern issue tracking that works seamlessly for companies small, big, and gigantic. I personally love Linear because I resonate with their values. You have to trust issue tracking software from people that have a zero-bug policy on the software that they sell to other people. Seriously, no bugs. Whether you're using it at work already or perhaps wanting to test it out on that side gig, head to linear.app/ALE to learn more. I'll also drop the link in the description. Thanks again to Linear for sponsoring today's conversation.
So let's talk about being a code machine in the age of AI. AI is just changing the world so quickly. I think when it first came out, it was like, oh, yeah, AI can do LeetCode problems because all of the inputs and outputs are well-defined. And over, I would say, the last 2 years, the goalposts have been continually moved. And it's just like, oh, actually it can like look at an entire code base. Like, oh, it can actually formulate a plan before it starts writing code. And then the individual pieces there's much less chance that they'll hallucinate. And now it's like, oh, actually your role is as a team lead of like, intern PhD level coding agents just to make sure that they don't go off the rails. In this world of AI software development where volume of code is no longer impressive, are the days of being a code machine numbered?
I think in some ways, even more junior people are all expected to be coding machines in training right now because AI lets you accomplish so much so fast. The style of code is changing too, like the dry principle, like do not repeat yourself. You would never kind of have like overly verbose code. It would never pass code review if you were like copy pasted a class and changed 3 lines and stuff like that, like in the old days. And now, like if AI is managing some library, it doesn't matter if code necessarily is repeated or not. As long as the AI pipelines are in place to manage the code well, like you can maybe increase performance of something a little bit by duplicating some code. You wouldn't because it's like unreadable. It's going to be a mess to maintain. It's like going to cause all these other problems that are negative that aren't worth like maybe a small performance increase. But if it's a performance increase and AI is just going to manage this and no one's ever really going to look at the underlying code, like there's more flexibility with like code quality, volume, all of that stuff. Like, so we're kind of challenging a lot of assumptions about how code's written. I think that's why a lot of people are trying to make analogies like AI is like managing a team of interns or AI is like autocomplete, but 10 times better. Like there's kind of like all these like analogies, but there isn't one analogy. It's kind of AI is changing the way that we like our relationship with code. And it's fascinating that engineers who at least started being an engineer like 2 years ago when these things started coming out, like you're going to see this transition. And it's probably going to be a really cool thing 5-10 years from now to look back on and be like, I saw this transition happening from like the way that we build software just changing so quickly. So I'm just trying to like absorb it all and take it all in, try to like see what's happening under the hood, not so much like coming up with an analogy. I don't think I can have like the perfect analogy for where code's going yet because I don't think we know. I can speak for myself. I'm writing way more code now. I posted a screenshot of my like GitHub commits. In all honesty, I was like not the first person to use AI because up until ChatGPT 4, so like including 3.5, the LLMs weren't quite good enough yet, just to be blunt. After 4 and 4.0 and Claude Sonnet 3.5 and 3.7 and now with the state of the art LLMs, like they actually have significantly improved where I can get a lot of productivity out of them. And when 4.0 or something came out, my number of commits just like doubled. And you can see like this like chart that's like flat spike step function chart. And it's still going up now. So as a coding machine, or the reason I had the ability to write so much code was because I had kind of a mental map of the whole code base in my head. And if you asked me to do something, I would generally not have to look at the code to know what I want to do because I like had it all in my head already. And writing the code was really the slowest part because it's like I have to like take this out of my head and like type it. And I don't type properly like with what's Almina or I wish I could get it out of my head onto the page faster. And AI actually lets me do that because I'm able to now explain in words and the AI actually generates all of the code. And now I learn how to say in even fewer words to get AI to do stuff. Like most of my prompts when I'm coding aren't even human readable sentences. They're like choppy words like it'll be like persona class, like red squares make blue when blah. And it like I'm going to start communicating in like beeps and tones, it's like my own communication framework or something, or like a brain implant or something.
I think, I took a hard line and my perspective on it is it just shifts so rapidly right now. Steve Yagi, I had him on the podcast, and he basically came out of retirement because he was finally like, this backlog that I've accumulated for my life, I can actually address right now. The thing that worries me the most is like, how are young people or people that are new to industry or thinking about transitioning in, how do they develop a taste and judgment when the way that we developed taste and judgment was by doing all of this stuff that the LLM can now do?
I think you just hit on the question that is upending computer science education market right now. Like CS degrees, CS grads are faced with this. Coding boot camps are like falling apart every day. Like one's closing or laying people off. The kind of junior engineer who does not have that experience, how do they develop the experience? The chicken and egg problem. And I have a lot of ideas, examples that I've seen work in smaller scales, but that problem is really like threatening the whole industry And I'm kind of nervous about what's going to happen. It's possible that only a handful of people will get a handful of engineers will get CS degrees, and a lot of engineers we work with in 5 to 10 years will be different paths. One of the things I'm personally like really, really believe in is the idea of apprenticeships. The idea of maybe going to college or post-secondary education for like a shorter amount of time, like a year. And then you do like a apprenticeship where you apply that with the support of a company and a mentor for like a year. And then maybe that converts to a full-time job. Maybe after that year, you go back to school and do like a advanced, academic period. Then another apprenticeship. Apprenticeships is very specific and it means different things in different contexts. Generally, there's some kind of government support though for apprenticeships. Like, why would Google or Amazon take you as an apprentice just to train you and then you go back to school? So there's some kind of like, there does need to be a broader support system to make that cycle work. But this idea of iterating between like shorter periods of academic training and then work and then iterating back is like a way to try to get that experience. And it will take longer. The University of Waterloo model has been doing this for a long time, where you do a semester of school, a semester internship, and you alternate. And it takes 5 years to graduate, but you have 6 internships. And those people end up like, when I was recruiting at Facebook, everyone in the industry feels the same way. You probably worked with the Waterloo people.
They're all solid.
Because you're basically getting a mid-level engineer for a junior engineer like price, so to speak, when you hire a new grad from Waterloo. Because they have 6 internships generally at different good companies. And that's about the equivalent of a mid-level engineer at that point. But that model, I think, works really well in different variations of that to kind of build that. I'm very familiar with the coding bootcamp space. There's like thousands of people who've graduated coding boot camps like in the past 2 to 3 years who like hit this wall where like the step function of experience or taste judgment requirement to even get hired. And they like join this boot camp because like 90% of the previous graduates during COVID got like 6-figure jobs. They thought that was going to happen to them and they hit this wall and they like don't know what to do. It's easier to say, go to Waterloo, take 5 years, alternate. But like, it's really hard when you just paid $25,000 to do this coding boot camp. You poured your heart and soul into it. You're really smart. You're really ambitious. You have great communication skills, but you have zero software engineering experience. Like what do you do and what advice? And for people who are more in that bucket, you don't have that same cycle. I have 2 pieces of advice. The first one is to try to take any kind of tech job that tries to leverage other stuff you've already done. So maybe you have taste and judgment in photography or swimming or like sports. Like some people were really good at some like golf. Like there's golf software companies that do like swing analysis and Topgolf. And maybe you won't be a software engineer there. Maybe you can be like a customer support engineer at Topgolf. And then you can, over time, like try to transition within that context. So that's like one piece of advice. And then the other one is like it sounds scary, but to start a company. And starting a company doesn't necessarily mean a venture funded startup. It just means, if you're doing a project, like make an LLC for it, send your paperwork to Stripe and create a Stripe account so that you can take payments. And then maybe you get 10 people to pay you and you have a company. Like the stuff you learn by having a paying customer giving you feedback and building things for them, that helps build the taste and judgment. That can be enough to get you that first job. So 2 pieces of advice if you're kind of like stuck right now, but longer term, more zoomed out, I believe in the like iterative learning apprenticeship, internship style approach.
Really what it comes down to is a really good solution to the wrong problem is worse than doing nothing. And so with this really powerful tools of LLMs and generative AI, like that's why a junior or a mid-level engineer is not going to fare as well as a senior or staff engineer going forward. I sort of see like a K shape to things where the people with the taste and judgment and the war scars, right, they're able to wrangle all of these agents and therefore able to multiply and amplify their output. And the people that don't essentially are going to wallow around because they don't know what to build. Like you literally have to prompt it with something, right? And I do think that, saying going to Waterloo is really simple. It's one of the hardest universities to get into. It's one of the most selective ones in Canada, right? And so I think at the end of the day, the reason boot camps and the other things like worked out so well was once you got your foot into the door, you were good. Getting that job in big tech or at a medium-sized company and then starting to do the work got you on this part where you can start to, there's some continuity from where you are to where you would like to go.
Snowball.
Yeah, but like this stair-step function, right? It just got really, really large with COVID, and it got really, really large with LLMs. If you're a software developer or a scientist in tech and want to nail your performance reviews and get promoted as quickly as possible, listen up. The fastest way to level up anything is through direct coaching from someone who's been there, who can see your blind spots, and who can give you the exact playbook on what to do next. That's why I created Speedrun to Promotion. It's my program where you work with me to get an exceeds performance rating and your next promotion in record time. We focus on the stuff that will actually move the needle for you. How to get visibility and communicate your impact. How to find more scope. How to manage your time and competing priorities. And how to position yourself for your next promotion. It's all the painful lessons that I learned climbing the ladder to be a principal engineer at Amazon applied to your specific situation, but without the scars. I'll be raising prices next year, but to close out 2025, I'm running an offer with a discounted price. I have limited spots, so if you're ready to take control of your career, the link is in the description. Let's make 2026 the year of your career growth. So let's talk about boot camps in a little bit more depth. What if boot camps turned into that apprenticeship program? Would you be much more in favor of it?
Yeah, I actually think before I started Formation, my wife was working on a boot camp. She started a coding boot camp for 0 to 1 that the idea was that the boot camp did contract projects for customers that were paid, and senior engineers who worked for the boot camp company would do those projects, and the students at the boot camp didn't pay anything at all to do this boot camp, and they got to shadow those senior engineers, see what they're doing. And some of them were hired as contractors to actually contribute themselves if they progressed enough. A lot of those people are doing really well. Like there's like 5 of them at Google now. Over time, they ended up there. Like that was a really good starting point. But I mean, the business model didn't work. And I think that's kind of like the challenge with coding boot camps is there's a wide spectrum of them. They're all different. It's hard to generalize, but the unit economics doesn't work as well as people would think. You would think like these boot camps are scamming everyone, taking $20,000, but like they're actually not making a lot of profit. There's just a lot of costs that eat into it. And to have really good instructors, you have to pay them a lot. And if there's not enough students, then you can't pay them as much and you have less experienced instructors. And it kind of like lots of things working against the boot camps model. So I don't know if like the private for-profit boot camp 0 to 1 model can necessarily work. Even in this market, there's boot camps that are like really trying to survive in different creative ways. So there's 2 kind of really hard obstacles to overcome. The first one is the job market pays very senior engineers a lot of money at big tech companies. 7, even 8 figures. And you see some of the numbers coming out of Meta that are like 9 figures or 10-figure offer. These are headlines. There's nuances, but still, like if you're going to get paid $1 billion over 10 years, if you hit some target at Meta, you're not going to teach a boot camp where like you're not going to be you're not going to teach a boot camp. And it's not like to say that people teaching boot camps are not capable. It's just the market value of the people, like the compensation that you get paid. I mean, the level I was at Meta, if you go on like levels at FYI or something, like you would be paid in the healthy 7 figures. For someone who's that type of engineer to be like, I'm going to try to start a coding boot camp, possibly like even lose money. Like there's not that many people that do that. And I think that in the boot camp industry, that I'm exaggerating a little bit to show the most extremes. I'll put that out there. But what we've seen in the coding boot camp industry is this continued trend of the boot camps hiring the recent grads to be instructors. And then they start off as like mentors, and then they're mentors for like 4 months, and then they become like full-blown instructors, and then they become like the lead instructors. And like it's not a knock on the people at all. Like at Formation, we've worked with a lot of like instructors, lead instructors from boot camps who like have been working there for 2 years, and they're like, now I want to get a job at like Facebook. Can you help me? And the Formation's like a good fit for them. I worked with those people, and like they would be like fantastic engineers, like nothing wrong with the people themselves. They just don't have that taste and judgment that I'm talking about. It's almost like not quite a chicken and egg problem, but there is just not really the economic incentives for like the engineers who have all that taste and judgment to like impart it on people in the context of a boot camp at a larger scale. There is at like the 10, 20 person scale, but at the like kind of larger scale, it's not quite there. And I think that might be a breaking point that has to be overcome.
Yeah, it just seems to me that the difference between, say, an apprenticeship and a boot camp is that as an apprentice, you serve under a journeyman or a master, right? It's not like you're hanging out with like apprentice plus one, right? Trying to figure out how to like, be a stone worker or whatever. You need a big delta between where you are and where you're going. Like that's just strictly necessary. And that just doesn't scale because essentially like the leveling system within big tech is this uber flat pyramid where the people that would be the most effective at teaching people at scale in these sort of like compressed timelines have no economic incentive, again, at scale, to go and help. There might be one or two folks that are there, but they're only going to be able to help a 20-person cohort.
To tie to taste and judgment, the LLMs right now, Scale AI started hiring a lot of engineers as contractors. Mercor is like exploding right now. And you see these headlines about this company, Mercor. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with it, but they facilitate contractors to work with like tech companies for contract projects, like hourly projects. A lot of those happen to be training LLMs. And Mercor is exploding because the AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, they need senior engineers who are getting paid like $200 an hour on Mercor through Mercor to train LLMs because their LLMs are trying to capture the taste and judgment of engineers. That could still be like a threat to the senior engineer longer term. They haven't captured it yet. But if you kind of look at this framework of like transferring the taste and judgment, exactly like the apprenticeship and analogy that you gave, there has to be that delta of taste and judgment. And it's so hard to put taste and judgment into classroom setting that's why that apprenticeship model is like someone's just watching you for a year and they soak up some of that taste and judgment. Some of the junior engineers that we've had, like some of the more junior ones, like they would say that they're just trying to sponge in some of my taste and judgment and just soak it in and sponge it in. Like that is how you kind of 100% agree on that. And I think with the bootcamp model, when you have like people who just graduated teaching you, there isn't that soaking in. So unless you can get that delta. So formation, we are helping people just with interview prep. So most people are currently working as engineers. They're just preparing for interviews. But the model is to have like small group mentorship sessions. And one of the challenges we have is we work with engineers who are junior engineers, seniors. We have staff engineers from like Google who want to get another job. And like that person might be a really good mentor for a junior person and they need a mentor who's more senior. We're trying to scale the mentorship allocation problem where when we create these groups, dynamic group sessions, we are trying to find a mentor that is a certain level delta to the group. And we don't want it to be too much because that could be inefficient we want to have just the right transfer of knowledge in a 1 hour session. We're a very small company. We're trying to chip away at that. But we have seen that could work to help scale a little bit. How far that kind of idea scales, I'm not sure. We'll have to see how formation does. But I haven't seen other people trying that approach though. Maybe we'll solve it or we solved it and we just need to grow more, but we'll see.
In a vacuum, I don't think there's a reason why an LLM couldn't be a senior engineer. I think boils down to is that there are very few priors, right? Like you have all of these inputs into being a senior engineer that are essentially not in the corpus of internet text that are out there. It's a hallway conversation that occurred, or it might be like log files or metrics from like servers that are inside of a network within the company, so sort of locked up. And so you actually can't capture what's going on. The other thing is, as you get higher and higher level, the amount of decisions that you make like decreases. And so there are just very few decisions that are like really well documented where you can sort of like apply that judgment and figure out what was spoken about within that room to make that big decision. Jeff Bezos, my spirit animal when it comes to corporate stuff, he's basically like, well, as you get higher and higher level, you just make fewer and fewer more impactful decisions with less and less information and clarity. That is just not captured in the text of all internet like text. It'd be super interesting. Like at some point, somebody's going to figure out how to to distill that. And at that point, I don't think there's going to be any reason an LLM couldn't be a senior engineer or a staff or a principal. I think the other thing that's holding it back is essentially like collective group learning within an LLM. Like you may be able to train a model locally for a very specific set of like inputs and outputs, but that doesn't transfer into like the big model that's there. And so once there's like large distributed collective like learning inside of these LLMs, then I think a lot of things change really, really quickly.
I mean, I don't like being completely wrong. I'm very humble when I'm wrong on things, but I still like want to make good decisions. I don't want to like make decisions that might make someone else's life harder or anything. But a lot of junior engineers look at senior engineers as these like godlike figures who can like do no wrong. And it's almost like the definition of correct is what these people say. And just top to bottom, we have to be more open about failure and learning from failure, because that's actually how taste and judgment are created. All of the things that I've grown from were from like screwing something up. When you make the mistake and you really like made a team angry, that's like how you learn from that. You don't really learn if you're just always doing everything right. I think that that's probably where like as humans, the senior engineers can be more vulnerable and open about their mistakes. Facebook had this thing called the SEV review process. When there's like a site-wide incident, big outage, a huge panel of people get together, they review logs and everything in detail. Those reports are probably like a gold mine for like the internal LLMs at like Facebook or something right now, because they can look at like what all these like super senior engineers screwed up completely and like why they screwed up and every like little detail of things that went wrong before, during, and after. And to learn from that, like that seems like a great opportunity too. And I think LLMs right now, they want to be trained on the correct answers. With LLMs, it's kind of like you need to give them positive examples to pattern match and replicate. Maybe the next unlock will be the other side, like kind of being open about our failures, documenting our failures, and group learning from all of our failures together. Maybe companies will be more open with each other about their failures, and the whole industry will grow and improve too. But yeah.
The equivalent of that at Amazon was COEs, or correction of errors. I think to really screw up, you need to screw up on multiple layers, and you need, so sort of like the holes lining up in Swiss cheese, like just like the perfect storm of things to occur. But every single big COE that's happened at Facebook and at Amazon has always led to a level up for collective learning, if you have that type of culture. Well, let's talk about the interview process. You're sort of like high touch interview prep service for folks that want to get like very desirable jobs that are out there. The current interview process within our industry is essentially, coding problems, leak code style problems, system design stuff if you're sort of like around senior or above, and then, some behavioral questions. Like that's the typical composition. There's, certain companies are heavier on, certain portions of it. Do you think that that's a good way to select an employee?
I have very strong opinions on this, and I've tried to yell them out loud and clear, and people sometimes are very cynical about the interview process and don't buy into it, but I will stand by my views on this. I actually think the current interview process is not bad. I'm hesitant to say good, but like
mid. Really?
Yeah, you mentioned Steve Yegi. Like Steve Yegi, I think said like the best of worst or bad options or something to that effect. Stripe, for example, when they first started, they would do week-long contracts with every employee, and then they would see how it was working with them. That's not scalable, and now they don't do that. I think they tried to keep going as long as they could, but they stopped at some point fairly quickly.
Because it didn't scale?
Yeah, it doesn't scale. It's expensive. Lawyers don't like that for IP issues, because you have these people contributing access to sensitive financial code. And then like, there's a lot of practical challenges. And like,
what about efficacy? Like, was it a good way to select people, but it just wasn't practical?
Yeah. So there's kind of like this time thing, right? So like if you could spend way more time interviewing someone and try to improve the accuracy of the hire. And there's some balance that's very just practical. At Facebook, like there is huge debates over whether interns should have 2 coding interviews or 1 coding interview. And they reduced it to 1 because of the like rational decision. It was not worth the engineering time to do 2. That's half as many interviews for 500 interns total. That's 500 engineering hours saved. And the outcomes were similar enough that like it was fine. The interview process is like a rational process, especially at the big companies, that has been fine-tuned over time to try to optimize for accurate outcomes, not perfect outcomes. There is then a process with performance reviews to remove people who shouldn't have been hired through the process, but were. Not that they're bad engineers, just like the process to identify the person they wanted failed and identified someone that was not a great fit for the company, and they need to correct for that. And they have processes to correct for that. It's just like engineering. It's like you solve a problem. It's always messy. There's no perfect solution. And then you have to have layers of fallback after that. So it's really just a process that's being engineered. And I think the current interview process is far from perfect. It's maybe even far from good, but it's definitely not bad. And the online culture on like Reddit and Blind is very cynical. Even LinkedIn, like very cynical of like the data structure and algorithm coding interview. People are frustrated that they have to like learn these things that they'll never do on the job, which I have actually done algorithms on the job from coding interviews, and then I normally pause and I'm like, oh my God, this is an interview question.
I've used recursion once in fraud. Well, what was the data structure that you...
It was this problem, print binary tree by level.
Yeah.
Because there's like tree structures in the DOM in the web, and I needed to like print something out. And it was like exactly the interview question. I was like, wow.
Gotta use a queue. Nice. We did a similar thing at Amazon where we looked at phone screens. We had a 2 phone screen process and we moved it down to 1 because it was literally indistinguishable in terms of the outcomes, but it required double the work. And it also filtered out people that would have made it through, right? So you're actually reducing numbers as well. You're probably the first person that I've ever met that's done a lot of interviewing that has basically said like, it's fine. It's not bad. This is kind of the best. This is kind of the only thing that scales.
So there's some people who are like, specifically like don't think that the coding interviews are like fair. They think that they're stupid. They think it's a game that they need to memorize. Like even at formation, we have people show up and they're just like, so like, are you going to give me like the secret list, like the real list of questions that Facebook asks? And it's like, no, why? Like there's no like magical secret list that you can just like hire us to help you find. Like that's not the point. You're missing the point entirely. We need to like start from zero with like, what's the point of the coding interview? And like, if you wanted to evaluate someone's ability to write code or problem solve, in a world where there's, 20 popular programming languages that are viable, they're common enough that people use, like, how do you compare people who have all these different backgrounds with these languages, experiences and stuff? Like the quote unquote leak code coding interview, the goal of it is to try to remove away like framework specific knowledge and language specific knowledge, and they're trying to distill down to what's your problem solving process? How do you like think about these simplified, focused problems? And then how do you think about your code? Like, can you organize your code in a clean way? Like, it's not so much like the final answer that you write. It's the thinking process of how you think about code and how you write code. And that's what the interviewers are, in the purest sense, what they're trying to evaluate in those coding interviews. And at Facebook, that's always what I was looking for, what the other really calibrated interviewers are looking for. It's not like this process was created as like a trick or a game or a gatekeeping. It's like it's literally trying to be a reasonable process to test your coding ability and your coding thinking without being biased by specific frameworks or language nuances and those types of things. And I think like that in the transition to AI, how AI is impacting interviewing and changing, we're starting to see some changes there. People ask like, oh, should I even practice leak code anymore? Or like, does formation help me prepare for new interviews? It's like Sophie my co-founder and wife, she did a talk recently and she did like a slide that was like preparing for interviews before AI. And then she did a slide that was like preparing for interviews after AI. And it was like the exact same slide, but the title changed. And like, they thought it was like a bug at first, like that. Oh, you made a mistake. You copy paste the slide. Just like, no. The point is this. It's the same. It's the same like mental preparation process. It's the same communication process. It's the same thinking process. It's the same way that you talk about the problem. Like not much has actually changed before and after AI if you're preparing properly for interviews.
I think your point is that we should be optimizing for fluency rather than gamification, right? And memorization. Is that the reason why the preparation is the same?
It's not so much coding fluency, but tying it to the taste and judgment, senior engineering kind of topics. As a very calibrated interviewer, when I'm interviewing someone, I'm really trying to extract that taste and judgment. And it's just, that's kind of like what I'm trying to pull out of the coding interview. You can tell how comfortable a person is with like trees by throwing like interesting twists to problems at people. And you can see how they like thinks about their code. And do they think about it like top to bottom, or do they piece it together in like blocks? And then if they have blocks with the systems design, you really get into this, but like, can they identify the boundaries between boxes and reconnect them and reconfigure them like Legos? Those are the types of like things that you're really like kind of testing for between the lines, more than just like anything about like code writing at all.
So I've done a ton of interviews as well. And I've said as much in my YouTube videos, which is basically a good interviewer is trying to understand how deft you are in terms of problem solving. Can you do the mental gymnastics that are necessary as constraints change, as the problem slightly shifts? Like, can you also shift your thinking as well? That's what I try to do during the coding interview. But I don't think that scales. Good interviewers don't scale. It turns out, like, when you need to hire 1,000 software developers, you need to put people into positions of hiring, and they're actually not good interviewers. You know, I work with some people as well. Meta is notorious for having the right answer to the coding problem. I think that's a result of like the fact that they're kind of the only people hiring right now in mass. And so I'm trying to rectify that with what you're saying as well, because I believe you.
Yeah.
But I also understand the reputation of Meta and its current hiring process.
Yeah, I don't want to criticize Meta on this too much, because it's not like a systemic problem, but it is interview training that is the problem. And at Formation 2, it's like we're hammering in the thought process, the communication process. And then people go to an interview and then they come back and they're like, oh, my interviewer like was like 2 years out of school and like didn't seem like, and I'm like, you do get like the untrained interviewer sometimes too that throws a wrench in it. But like, that's not the like typical case. In my understanding of Meta right now, for example, is that they're actually trying to lean more on their most senior interviewers and senior engineers to train to become interviewers. I don't have any inside information if it's explicitly to rectify the problem of more like junior engineers doing these like copy paste leak code style interviews or whatever that are not in that spirit. Yeah, any scaled up process has variation, and I think that like I stand by the spirit of the interviews, whether it's executed at the leaf nodes always that way.
It's the most frustrating for me. So there's the coding part where it's basically like, well, if you just want the answer, if you just want the optimal, you know, like the best big O answer, all of this could have just been in leak code, right? Or some integrated idea. Like, why do you need a human on the other side? But it infuriates me the most on the system design interviews, I think, because, you know, there is DDIA and all these other books that are out there, but there's literally no textbook on system design that's credible for like the type of engineering that you might do inside of these large companies. And so the mental model for me when I was doing all of the system design interviews was, can we have a useful conversation where some of the topics are around, you know, systems that are out there, and not like, I'm literally not going to go and take the output of this conversation and then like go and build like the Twitter feed or the Facebook feed or whatever, right? Like, no, we're not going to have a 45-minute conversation with a rando and then like go put that into prod. Like that's an actual system design is much more intentional, is much more nuanced, right? And it's usually smaller scopes than, you know, design Facebook or whatever. You know, I love interviewing so much. I'm a slightly more pessimistic, but still optimistic on the spectrum for the current incarnation of interviews. But how is Meta using AI inside of their interviews right now? I know that they've made the shift, but I don't know what that means in a practical, like what's the manifestation of that?
Yeah, so there's the coding interview and then there's kind of systems design. So the coding interview, they're starting to roll out partially in addition to the classic whiteboarding style interview, a AI practical problem. So the idea is like you're given starter code, you're given you're still given a coding pad, not full-blown ID environment, like a toy environment, but you have access to simple LLMs and much larger amounts of starter code that you likely need an LLM to help navigate, and then adding features and building things in that code base. So they're moving towards that. If I were at Meta, like they're definitely going to have a calibration process where they like rotate these in, they test the outcomes blind, like before and after and all that stuff, you know, to make sure. I don't think the intention is necessarily to fully replace whiteboard coding interviews 100%, but to supplement them with a more practical interview that is now possible because of LLMs that exist that didn't exist before, where that same interview was not as practical for them. So yeah, that's something, that formation that we're starting to help people prepare for as well, because it's just starting, and I'm expecting other companies will probably follow Meta's lead over time. But
well, you're framing it as an experiment, which I don't think the the public writ large is framing it as. They're saying, oh, interviews are shifting to AI. And you're, I think, taking a much more nuanced approach, which is probably like they're checking it out. And if it's an experiment that fails quickly, like they'll just cut and run. What's your take? What's your like visceral reaction? Like, is this AI interview here to stay? Or is it going to go back to the thing that we've optimized for over the last 25 years?
I think AI in interviews is here to stay. There's many facets of AI, but a huge one is engineers using AI as a day-to-day tool, just like they use VS Code, just like they use Stack Overflow, whatever, Google searching. Like, it's a tool that they need to use, and that significantly impacts one's productivity. So you need to test some signal for that to know when you're hiring someone, because if you hire someone who can't do that, they might be a like 0 or 1x output, and someone who's really good with AI might be 5x, even if they're just as capable in all other respects. But like, the companies are still figuring out like how to use AI. So it's like a moving target a bit. I think Meta's probably the forcing function to start earlier than some of the other things is probably that they want a brand about being at the leading edge of AI, that they want to show that they can move fast. It's very hard to change an interview process. That's why the other companies haven't done it. It's very hard to do it at scale consistently. Like, it's like not the main priority of a company. It's like a second or third priority. So it's like, it's very hard to change. So Meta, I think, is trying to make a stance that like, we care so much about AI, we are making this happen. I also think it's like engineers on the ground, that my friends who work at Meta, like some of them are very passionate about trying to change interviewing, and like they're just personally motivated to try to work on the problem. So we'll see. I highly suspect it will keep being iterated on and evolving, and specifically the problems that get asked. That's one of the things I'm trying to ask around and learn about, is like, what are the types of problems, exact type of problems people are going to get in these Meta interviews? Because I've heard multi-thousands of lines. What is the thing that you're going to give someone to test them on? I think like that could vary the whole experience. If you get one file that looks like a leak code problem and you have to use a little bit of AI, that's different than if you're given like a few classes, like a board game where you have to maybe design some data modeling, versus like, here's like a whole code base, like build a feature. There's a huge spectrum of coding of like interview experiences, and I haven't heard anything concrete from Meta yet. It's just rolling out now, so maybe we'll get some signal on that, but I haven't heard anything on my side of like where we're landing on that exactly yet. Other than that, it's just going to be a bit more practical and more starter code. It's a long answer, but they are here to stay. But I think they will continue to keep iterating and evolving.
You said that the top 5 engineers in the world aren't on LinkedIn. Why not?
I actually stand pretty strongly by this. When I was at Facebook, the top engineers were like, if you had a LinkedIn account, people would be like wondering if you're like job hunting or if you're open to work or something. I don't want to like spill the beans on like the secrets of the industry here, but there's like very senior, very highly paid recruiters that work at the top companies who have very strong long-term social relationships with a lot of top engineers. You probably know some from your time over at Amazon, like, and it's not like a sketchy, just like you make friends with a recruiter doing like campus recruiting. You spend like a whole week with them, like at Stanford, and you get to know them and you're friends with them. And then like over 10 years, these recruiters develop these relationships with really like strong engineers. And then this is kind of like the secret backroom dealings of Silicon Valley, is like these engineers are not, their names are nowhere, but they are the ones that are the most desirable by like these recruiters fighting for each other to try to get them to go to the top companies. So that's kind of like where those engineers live. Like the $100 million engineer is like not on LinkedIn with like a tagline that's like hashtag $100 million engineer. Like, but I feel like that's like a bit of a specific case. It doesn't mean that your strategy should be like delete LinkedIn and all the offers will come. There was a strategy someone was proposing where they were like, okay, this is the best strategy. Put company names on your LinkedIn and just don't put any job title, any description, just the company name, because it implies that like you want the public record to be correct, but then you are too busy to fill out the details. You don't want to market yourself. I don't know if that strategy works or not, but I do know that some of these engineers who don't have LinkedIns, they do have very minimal LinkedIns. They'll have like their name and then like Meta, like 2007 to present, and that's it. There's nothing else there and like stuff like that.
Is there a top 5 or 10% engineer that leans into personal brand? Or is it like, are you just saying like absolutely all top 5 engineers, like that's the characteristic, is that they don't look for attention or they don't feel the need to broadcast?
I don't know any of those like top engineers who get like the special equity grants and like the special dinners with Bezos or whatever and stuff like that have big personal brands. Which is interesting. I make a lot of professional sports analogies, and like athletes do have like that is a big part of like their market value is also their personal brand. For engineers, it's the opposite. It's like the companies want to protect their best engineers. They don't want anyone knowing about them. I'm sure you've seen this at Amazon where there's some engineers who they create so much more value for the company than they're paid, even though they're paid so much that like they're paying for like all the other engineers on the team, like the good engineers, still good engineers, but they're just like, they're giving everyone a lot more room to screw up. They're giving everyone a lot more projects to try because they're creating so much value. Like the companies don't want anyone touching those people. They kind of want those people to be so happy and so busy that they don't have any public presence. I'm talking current FANG employees. There's very good engineers like who are earlier in their careers or semi-retired, or the post-FANG, let's call it. Post-FANG engineers like us, maybe, I don't know. Like the post-FANG engineers who had very good careers who at FANG, but now we're talking. Like a lot of the companies don't want their engineers talking. Like you have to get special approval to even like talk publicly. Part of that is because they want to control like the messaging and also keep those engineers like focused, you know? So now there's like some talk about, but it's like, it is really hard because you don't get the full picture of like, of those current people who are like sitting in that room writing that code right now.
I think there's a difference between companies wanting to lock up their best. I think you can compensate them quite a bit. Ultimately, they have no control about whether their employees have a LinkedIn presence or not. Like, what about self-promotion are they just completely uninterested in? Because I think ultimately, I'm a big proponent of people, especially early career, like creating a brand online, because what a wonderful way for like recruiters to come out and like understand who you are. They just are completely uninterested in that self-promotion and that branding. Because I see a lot of upside there. I mean, there are what I would consider top 1% engineers, very large LinkedIn presences. Or maybe are you saying that those people are sort of like not actually as good as they might be portraying?
Some amount of it is like not as good as portraying or something to that effect. Don't insult anyone. There's always edge cases and exceptions. I can look at it on a case-by-case basis or something and like look at it. But like I had many discussions about the compensation system with various leaders. And one of the HR leaders told me that like the compensation philosophy is to pay an engineer $1 more than that engineer thinks they're worth. Just barely more than like that person like thinks they should be getting. That scales really well. Because if you're paying all the people just a little bit more, then the company is still efficient. They want to pay you just a little bit more so that they're efficiently spending. And they want you to feel like you're being super well compensated because you're getting paid a little bit more than you like think you probably should get paid. So there's that aspect where if someone feels like their company's not paying them what they're worth, then they might have a reason to seek more market value. I don't know.
Got it. Okay. So you're saying like there's basically this price discovery that's going on in the market. And so if you're happy, there's no reason to make a LinkedIn and to try to network and to try to climb higher. Is that the argument?
That's the argument, yeah. The one thing that I think has changed is like some surveys that have shown that Gen Z or Gen Alpha, like the number one job they want is influencer now, or like TikTok influencer. And like, so I think there's some shift too. And like, I am speaking to maybe a slightly like legacy, older demographic that's been in Silicon Valley for 10 years or more. There might be like a 5-year engineer who has more of a public presence and that's been a part of them since high school. And their software engineering journey is still a part of this public journey. And like, I could see like that breaking this principle. The thing I'm saying is applying more to the like rational market of legacy engineer or older engineers.
What topic is just super overrated right now and you just wish people would just stop talking about it?
One I was like observing recently is this idea that you can vibe code SaaS companies in a weekend. Or vibe code like $1 million startups like in a weekend.
I would expect a code machine to be like, yeah, let's do it if you can do it.
When you run a company, like Formation's a venture-backed company. We've had a lot of employees over the years. We've built a lot of stuff. We've built world-class product. We've made a lot of product mistakes. And then when you're running a company and you have to do all the paperwork and insurance and like legal and like all the different aspects of running a company, like it's very, very hard. Whenever I see a headline that's like, oh my God, I built $1 million SaaS company in a weekend. This is crazy. My first response is, how did you get SOC 2 compliance in a weekend? Because no big corporate customer would be your customer unless you have SOC 2 compliance, because like they need that in a lot of big SaaS contracts. Like there's there's details missing there. I don't want to like discourage people from trying. They should. People should try to make a $1 billion company in a weekend. But you have to also be like realistic about it at the same time. I'm genuinely seeing people who believe some of these things and are like spend like a week trying to build something and then like it doesn't work and then they just like kind of wasted their time. It kind of really irks me when people are chasing like short-term gains instead of trying to discover what their true passion and true like skills are. Like, what is the thing that you're really good at? How do you discover that? And then can you apply that to creating value for the world? And that's like my dream. That's like Formation's dream, is like, can we get everyone finding the thing that they're good at? And can we help them get a job where they produce value from that? I have a similar irk to scams. Some of the most sophisticated scams out there, I'm like, oh, if these people just put their energy to like something like value creating for the world, they would like be so impactful, but like they're putting it to such sophisticated scams. So anything that's like right now, it's like the $1 million SaaS headline vibe coding stuff that.
Well, I think like people are just attracted to the $1 million part and they just sort of see the code as a means to get to that money. And so obviously it gets a lot of attention. You know, it could just be like, I did X to get $1 million. They'll be like, oh, that's interesting, right? And so it's that sort of like fixation on the outcome instead of like the fixation on like trying to find a thing that you are doing that like gives you fulfillment or adds value to society or to the world.
It sounds like a privileged place to be in, but like to say that, like just find your passion. But I've worked with and seen a lot of people who have gone from no wealth to extremely wealthy. And the wealthiest people are also the unhappiest people. If you're chasing money, you're in for a ride. It's going to be ups and downs. And it's not necessarily what you think. I grew up in middle class in Canada and I wanted to make a lot of money when I was older. And it was more like, buying lottery tickets and you're like, someday I would be a millionaire. Like there's these aspirational dreams of money. But then like when you see the people who are chasing money, they're never happy. They're always chasing either more money or they got the money, but they didn't create value. And they're seeing like friends doing really impactful things. And then they feel like they don't really have anything to do. And they spent all this time chasing money and they didn't build something that they're really good at. And now they're not good at anything. And their friends are now slowly like having more and more impact that they're like jealous of. And it's very like complicated. And my view on this is that it's an education problem, government, society-wide education problem, that at earlier ages, like we have to have stronger education systems that help people find things that they're good at, support them, and give them the systems they need so that they develop these talents and skills over a longer period of time. You can't rewind the clock if you're already grown up. So you got to like do what you do with the situation you're dealt, right? But
one thing that we didn't talk about is if developers, if individuals are more efficient, where does that efficiency go? Does it result in more things getting built and more value getting created? Or does it turn into this fight for like who gets to actually keep the margin?
In the past, I might have said that people will output roughly the same or with some inflation or something and have more free time. That's kind of like what's happened in the US culture over the past 100 years is there's been more and more leisure time and people fill that with spending more money on other things like restaurants and travel. But I actually think AI is different because AI is like an existential threat to a large number of jobs, and not in a way that like you can use AI to get 30% more leisure time, or you can just not and do the same. It's like it might completely displace or replace jobs. And if you don't even have a job to do, then like that sounds like scarier. Whether that's true or not, whether it would happen or not, just the idea of your job being entirely replaced might encourage people to produce more with AI rather than just like be more efficient. They really need to like the pressure to really stand out and to do more and more and more so that your job is safe or your livelihood is even safe at some level if AI got, took over that much. But yeah. So I might actually lean into the more output, more value creation than the efficiency side, but we'll see.
You're in the business of helping other people get jobs. Are you worried that your business won't be around in its current form in 5 years?
Yeah, it's possible. I think this is one of the things like before starting a business, like I see a lot of startups where just like everything's always going great. Everything's like you ask someone like how things are going, like it's incredible. It's incredible. And like when you have a company that's actually like growing and been through a lot and ups and downs, like you realize that you have to be very real. And companies should not exist if they're not adding value, or else it's kind of a scam. It could be a bit subjective about what the value is, or the value is relative, but like you're doing something, right? If you're just taking money and then not doing anything, then the business shouldn't exist. Like it just doesn't make sense. It's not rational. It's not good for anyone. So if Formation can't help people prepare for interviews, whatever the interviews may be, then it shouldn't exist. If AI changes what preparing for interviews mean, then we have to like change with it or not exist. Or it's possible that even with AI, then we might always need mentorship-based preparation. And it kind of like we have to be prepared for all outcomes. But there is a world for sure where we don't exist. We have to be okay with that. I think if you're doing a startup and you can't accept the idea that your business shouldn't exist, then you're probably doing something wrong. You might be doing other things right. You might be getting by for some. Yeah, you're probably doing something wrong.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for the conversation today. Had a great time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to chat.
If a viewer wants to find out more about you, where should they go?
LinkedIn's a good place. I'm pretty easy to find, just my first and last name anywhere.
You're no longer a top 5 engineer, top 5% engineer now.
No, I'm not. LinkedIn. I'm visible now.
Yeah.
But it was very scary. Putting my like level publicly, it was like one of the scariest things. It's like people at Facebook don't disclose their levels. It's a secret, but
super great. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.